Distinguished viewers, in less than 1 year, Donald Trump has declared 9 national emergencies. 9. That's more than most presidents declare in an entire term, and 3 of those emergencies directly target Canada. Think about that for a moment. The President of the United States has invoked extraordinary executive powers, powers designed for genuine crises like wars and pandemics, to impose tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, automobiles, and energy exports. He's declared a national emergency at the northern border, claiming Canada is flooding America with fentanyl. He's used emergency authorities to bypass Congress and unilaterally reshape North American trade. For Canada, this is not abstract constitutional theory. This is economic warfare conducted under the cover of emergency declarations. Prime Minister Mark Carney has responded with a $1 billion support package for affected industries. He's imposed retaliatory tariffs, then lifted some of them. He's apologized to Trump over an Ontario anti-tariff advertisement. He's traveled to China to diversify trade away from American dependence. And through it all, Carney has been navigating an impossible situation. How do you deal with a president who treats emergency powers as routine policy tools and views your country as a national security threat? Let us begin with the facts, because the scale of what Trump has done is genuinely unprecedented. On his first day back in office, January 20th, 2025, Trump declared a national emergency at the southern border. Within weeks, he added more. A national energy emergency claiming America's energy supply is inadequate, even though the United States is the world's largest oil producer. An emergency designating drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Then came the emergencies that hit Canada directly. In February 2025, Trump declared 3 separate tariff emergencies targeting Mexico, Canada, and China. He invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a law designed for genuine national security crises, to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian goods. His justification? Canada's alleged failure to stop fentanyl trafficking and illegal immigration across the northern border. In April, he declared another emergency, this time imposing what he called reciprocal tariffs on trading partners with large surpluses over the United States. Canada, which sends 75% of its exports to America, was hit with escalating duties that eventually reached 35% on some goods. The pattern became clear. Trump was using emergency declarations to do what Congress would never authorize. He was bypassing the normal legislative process, invoking extraordinary executive powers, and imposing his economic agenda through a presidential decree. Legal experts immediately questioned whether these declarations met the statutory definition of a national emergency. The National Emergencies Act requires that emergencies address unusual and extraordinary threats. America's trade deficit with Canada has existed for decades. Canada is not flooding the United States with fentanyl. The northern border is one of the safest, most peaceful international boundaries in the world. None of this constitutes a genuine emergency, but Trump declared emergencies anyway, because the law gives him that power. Here's what those declarations actually do. They unlock approximately 150 special legal authorities that normally require congressional approval. They allow the president to redirect military construction funds, impose sanctions, control commerce, and bypass environmental regulations. They concentrate power in the executive branch by treating routine policy disputes as national security crises. And once declared, national emergencies can remain in effect indefinitely, as long as the president renews them annually. Trump currently has 11 active national emergencies. Some date back to his first term. Others are brand new. All of them expand presidential authority beyond constitutional norms. For Canada, the impact has been devastating. The tariffs Trump imposed under emergency powers hit critical sectors. Steel and aluminum industries, which employ tens of thousands of Canadians, face duties that made their products uncompetitive in American markets. The automotive sector, which supports more than 500,000 Canadian jobs across integrated North American supply chains, suddenly faced 25% tariffs on finished vehicles and parts. Energy exports, including oil and natural gas that fuel American homes and businesses, were subjected to 10% levies. Lumber, agriculture, and manufacturing all took hits. The economic damage was immediate. Canadian steel producers laid off workers. Automakers warned of plant closures. Energy companies saw profit margins collapse. And this was all happening while Canada was still negotiating the renewal of the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement. the trade pact that was supposed to guarantee tariff-free access to American markets. Trump's emergency declarations effectively shredded that agreement. They demonstrated that promises of free trade mean nothing when a president can declare an emergency and impose tariffs by executive order. The rule-based trading system that Canada had relied upon for decades collapsed in a matter of weeks, and Carney's government was left scrambling to respond to economic shocks that no one had prepared for. Mark Carney inherited this crisis when he became Prime Minister in March 2025. His predecessor, Justin Trudeau, had resigned amid plummeting approval ratings and internal Liberal Party rebellion. Carney, the former governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, campaigned on a promise to stand up to Trump and protect Canadian sovereignty. But once in office, he discovered that standing up to Trump meant navigating a minefield where every move carried enormous risk. Carney's initial response was defiance. In April, when Trump imposed automobile tariffs, Canada immediately retaliated with 25% duties on more than $20 billion of American imports. The list was carefully calibrated to inflict maximum political pain. Canadian tariffs hit dairy products from Wisconsin, a swing state. They targeted bourbon from Kentucky, Mitch McConnell's home state. They struck at oranges from Florida, motorcycles from Republican districts, and cosmetics from politically sensitive markets. The message was clear: if Trump wanted a trade war, Canada would fight back. But the problem with fighting back against the United States is that Canada has far more to lose. 75% of Canadian exports go to America. Only about 20% of American exports go to Canada. The asymmetry is massive. When both countries impose equivalent tariffs, Canada suffers disproportionately because its economy is so much more dependent on cross-border trade. Canadian businesses started feeling the pressure immediately. Steel companies couldn't sell to American customers. Automakers faced supply chain disruptions that threatened to shut down production. Energy producers watched profits evaporate. And all of this was happening while Trump kept escalating. In June, Trump doubled tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum from 25% to 50%. His justification was that Canada had retaliated, which proved it was acting in bad faith. This created an impossible dynamic. If Canada didn't retaliate, Trump imposed tariffs without consequence. If Canada did retaliate, Trump used that retaliation as justification for even higher tariffs. There was no winning strategy, only damage control. Carney responded by intensifying negotiations while preparing additional reprisal measures. He told Parliament that his government was in intensive discussions with Washington, but was also ready to impose further retaliatory tariffs if those negotiations failed. Then came the breaking point. In October, the Ontario government, led by Conservative Premier Doug Ford, ran television advertisements criticizing Trump's tariffs. The ads quoted Ronald Reagan, a Republican icon, warning against protectionism. Trump saw the ads and exploded. He immediately ended trade talks with Canada and threatened to raise tariffs by another 10%. Carney, who had no control over what provincial governments advertised, found himself apologizing to Trump for someone else's actions. He called the president, expressed regret over the advertisements, and asked Ontario to stop running them. It was a humiliating moment. The Prime Minister of Canada apologizing to an American president for a domestic political advertisement. That incident revealed the core problem with Carney's position. He's trying to negotiate with someone who doesn't negotiate in good faith. Trump treats every interaction as a dominance contest. He interprets compromise as weakness. He punishes defiance and rewards submission. But even submission doesn't guarantee favorable treatment. It just delays the next escalation. Carney eventually made the strategic calculation that continuing to match American tariffs dollar for dollar was unsustainable. In August, he announced that Canada would drop most of its retaliatory tariffs to match the exemptions Trump had granted under the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. About 85% of Canadian goods would resume tariff-free access. Canada would retain tariffs only on steel, aluminum, and automobiles where Trump's duties remained in place. Critics immediately called this capitulation. Labor unions accused Carney of backing down and enabling more American aggression. Conservative opposition leader Pierre Poilievre called it a surrender. But Carney defended the decision as pragmatic. He argued that Canada was simply matching what the United States was doing, preserving tariff-free trade for the vast majority of exports, while continuing to fight on sectors where the damage was concentrated. The real question is whether that strategy actually works. Trump's effective tariff rate on Canada, averaging around 5 to 6%, is lower than what he's imposed on other major trading partners. That suggests Carney's approach has had some success in limiting the damage. But it also means Canada is absorbing billions in tariff costs while getting very little in return. Meanwhile, Carney has pursued a parallel strategy, diversification. He traveled to China in January 2026, the first visit by a Canadian Prime Minister in 8 years. The goal is to rebuild trade relationships that deteriorated under Trudeau and reduce Canada's dangerous dependence on American markets. Carney has announced a plan to double Canada's non-American exports over the next decade. He's pursuing closer ties with Europe, India, and Asia-Pacific nations. He's investing $1 billion in programs to help Canadian businesses retool for new markets. This is smart, long-term planning, but it doesn't solve the immediate problem. Canada can't replace 75% of its export market overnight. American dependence is structural, built into supply chains and infrastructure that took decades to create. Some argue that Canada is overreacting to Trump's emergency declarations, and that the tariffs, while painful, are not existential threats. After all, the effective tariff rate remains in single digits. Most Canadian exports still enjoy tariff-free access under customs exemptions. Economic growth, while slower, has not collapsed. Why treat this as a crisis? This argument misses the deeper danger. Trump's use of emergency powers establishes a precedent that future presidents will follow. If declaring a trade emergency allows a president to bypass Congress and impose tariffs unilaterally, every future president will use that tool. The rule of law in international trade disappears. Agreements become meaningless because they can be overridden by executive decree at any moment. Canada's entire trading relationship with the United States becomes subject to presidential whim rather than negotiated treaties. Moreover, Trump's emergency declarations are not just about economics. They're about power. By declaring Canada a national security threat, Trump is reframing the relationship from partnership to subordination. He's treating Canada not as an ally, but as a problem to be managed. That shift has consequences far beyond tariff rates. It affects defense cooperation, intelligence sharing, border management, and diplomatic coordination. If Trump genuinely believes Canada threatens American national security, every aspect of the bilateral relationship becomes adversarial. In November 2025, the United States Senate voted 50-40 on a resolution to block Trump's tariff emergency declarations against Canada. 4 Republicans joined Democrats in approving the measure, which would have terminated the national emergency Trump used to impose tariffs. But the resolution failed to achieve the veto-proof majority needed to overcome Trump's opposition. It died without ever reaching a final vote. That moment crystallized the challenge facing Canada. Even when American lawmakers recognize that Trump's emergency declarations are illegitimate, they lack the political will to stop him. Carney is left with no good options. He can retaliate, but retaliation triggers escalation. He can negotiate, but Trump's negotiations are traps designed to extract concessions without offering anything in return. He can diversify trade, but that's a decade-long project that doesn't address immediate pain. So Carney does all three simultaneously, while hoping that Trump's attention shifts elsewhere. It's not a strategy for victory, it's a strategy for survival. And for a middle power neighbor to an unpredictable superpower, survival might be the best Canada can hope for. Thank you for watching.